I remember the exact moment I realized my whole life was about to collapse. It wasn't when my husband found the messages. It wasn't when he threw his wedding ring across the kitchen floor. It was 3 seconds before that, when I watched his face change. When I saw the man who had loved me for 6 years look at me like I was a stranger wearing his wife's face. And the worst part, the man I had betrayed him with was standing just 20 feet away in our living room, holding a beer, laughing at something on the television. His best friend since college. The man who had been the best man at our wedding. Before you judge me, I want you to sit with me for a few minutes, because this isn't a story about a monster. It's a story about a woman who made choices she can never take back, and who has had to live with every single one of them. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be honest with yourself as I talk, because some of what I'm about to say might sound familiar. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was 26 years old, 3 years into a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, and I was disappearing from the inside. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like an excuse. I've had years to think about it, and I still don't know whether it is one or not. Daniel and I met in our last year of university. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man your mother calls a good one and squeezes your hand when she says it. He was kind. He remembered things, your favorite song, the name of your childhood pet, the exact way you liked your coffee. He was the kind of love that felt safe, and at 22, safe felt like everything I had ever wanted. We got married at 23. Too young, I know that now, but I didn't know it then. Then, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. For the first year, we were happy. Or I thought we were happy. Or maybe I was just too busy building the life to notice that I wasn't actually living in it. By year 2, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies where someone throws a plate or says something unforgivable. It was quieter than that. Daniel started working longer hours. He'd come home tired in a way that didn't leave room for me. We'd eat dinner mostly in silence, scrolling our phones, and then we'd go to bed, and he'd fall asleep almost immediately, and I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly this had become my life. I tried to talk to him about it. Daniel, I feel like we don't really connect anymore, like we're just roommates. He'd look up from his laptop, tired eyes behind tired glasses, and say, "Baby, I'm just stressed. Work is crazy right now. Can we talk about this on the weekend?" And then the weekend would come, and there'd be errands, and his family, and my family, and Sunday night would arrive and nothing had been talked about, and the loneliness would settle back into my chest like something that lived there now. I want to be clear, Daniel never hit me. He never humiliated me. He wasn't a bad man. He was just absent. Emotionally absent in a way that I didn't have the vocabulary to fully explain to myself at the time. And I think that's almost harder in some ways. When someone is obviously terrible, leaving is simple. When someone is fundamentally good but just not there, you spend years questioning whether the problem is actually you. I started questioning myself constantly. Am I too needy? Am I being ungrateful? Don't I have a good life? I had a lovely apartment, a husband who didn't cheat, who paid the bills, who loved me in whatever language he was capable of. And yet I was starving for something I couldn't name. That's when Marcus started to matter. Marcus had been Daniel's best friend since freshman year of college. He was at our wedding. He'd been at every birthday dinner, every holiday gathering. He was family. That's how I had always thought of him, as family. He was different from Daniel in almost every way. Where Daniel was reserved, Marcus was warm and talkative. Where Daniel expressed love through actions and practicality, Marcus expressed it through words, long, thoughtful conversations that made you feel seen. He was the kind of person who made eye contact when he asked how you were, and actually waited for the real answer. For 3 years, I had never once thought of Marcus as anything other than Daniel's best friend. And then one evening in February, a Tuesday, I remember because Daniel had canceled our dinner plans for the 3rd Tuesday in a row for a work call, Marcus showed up at our door. He'd been in the neighborhood, he said. He had leftover Thai food and a bottle of wine, and he looked almost apologetic, like he knew he was intruding. "Danny not home?" he asked. "Work call," I said, and something in my voice must have given me away because Marcus tilted his head and said, "You okay, Lena?" And I laughed the way you do when you're about to cry, but you can't let yourself. I'm fine, I said. I'm always fine. He came in anyway. We ate the Thai food on the kitchen counter and drank the wine, and we talked. Not about anything serious at first, just easy conversation, the kind I hadn't had in months. And then somehow, without me noticing how it happened, we ended up talking about loneliness. About what it means to be in a room full of people and still feel invisible. Do you ever feel that way? Marcus asked, and he was looking at me very carefully. I said, yes, more than I should admit. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I think Daniel doesn't realize. He's not trying to make you feel that way. I know, I said. That's what makes it hard. That was the first moment. The first hairline crack. Nothing happened that night. Nothing physical, nothing even inappropriate. But something had been said out loud that I had never said to anyone, and Marcus had heard it, and he had not minimized it or changed the subject, and that small, ordinary thing felt like water in a desert. I told myself it was just a conversation between friends. But I thought about it for a week. After that, Marcus texted more. Not in a suspicious way at first, just checking in, sending something funny, asking if I'd seen a show he'd mentioned. And I texted back. Because what was wrong with that? He was my husband's best friend. We were all close. But slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, the texts became longer, more frequent, more personal. He'd ask about my day not in the surface-level way most people do, but in the specific, follow-up way that showed he'd actually been listening the time before. And I found myself saving things up throughout the day to tell him. Little observations, small frustrations, funny moments, things I would have once saved for Daniel. There was an afternoon in April where I caught myself sitting in a parking lot after work, typing a long message to Marcus about something that had upset me, and I stopped mid-sentence and looked at what I was doing. I was telling Marcus things I hadn't told my husband. I sat there for a long moment, and then I hit send anyway, because I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, because I needed the outlet, because I was just venting to a friend. That is how it starts, not with a grand, dramatic decision, with a small one, and then another small one, and then another. Each one feels manageable on its own. It's only when you look back from the other side that you see the staircase you were building. We met for coffee once in May. Just once, I told myself, just to talk in person the way friends do. But I chose a coffee shop across the city from our neighborhood. I remember that detail clearly. I chose it because I didn't want to run into anyone who knew us. I knew, on some level, even then, I just refused to call it what it was. At the coffee shop, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his when I was mid-sentence about something painful, and he said, "You deserve to feel seen, Lena. You deserve that." I didn't pull my hand away. I should have. I didn't. The first time something physical happened was in June. I've gone back to that moment thousands of times in my memory, looking for the exact place where I could have stopped it. I found at least 7. 7 clear moments where I could have stepped back, where I could have said no, where the outcome could have been different. I chose none of them. We were at Marcus's apartment. I had told Daniel I was visiting a girlfriend. It was the first time I had lied to Daniel in 6 years of being together. And I remember the lie left my mouth so easily that it frightened me. I had expected guilt to make my voice shake. Instead, I sounded completely normal. What followed I won't describe in detail. That's not the point of this story. The point is what I felt afterward, not relief, not joy. What I felt was a cold, spreading panic, and underneath it, buried but present, something that shamed me even more than the panic. I felt alive, in a way I hadn't in a very long time. And I hated myself for it. I drove home that night and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could go inside. Daniel was already asleep. I stood in the bathroom and looked at my reflection, and I barely recognized myself. "What are you doing?" I asked the woman in the mirror. She didn't have a good answer. The months that followed were the darkest kind of double life. On the surface, I was a normal wife. I cooked dinner, I attended family events, I held Daniel's hand at his mother's birthday party. And inside, I was living another reality entirely. Secret messages, carefully timed calls, excuses built on top of excuses like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Marcus and I never talked about what we were doing in direct terms. That was its own kind of cowardice. Naming a thing makes it real. We kept it unnamed, and I think we both believed if we didn't say it out loud. It was somehow less than what it was. But guilt has a way of seeping into everything. I started snapping at Daniel over small things. I overcorrected by being extra affectionate at other times, which made me feel sick. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake cataloging my lies the way some people count sheep, checking the story, rechecking the timeline, making sure nothing contradicted anything else. There was an evening in August where Daniel sat down next to me on the couch, turned off the television, and said, "Lena, talk to me. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but I know something's wrong." And I looked at my husband, this good, steady, imperfect man who was finally showing up the way I had wanted him to, and I said, "I'm just tired. Work stress." He pulled me into his chest and held me for a long time and said, "I know I've been absent. I'm sorry. I want to fix that." And I let him hold me, and I said nothing, and I think that was the most truly awful thing I did in this whole story. Not the initial betrayal. That moment, accepting his apology for something that was no longer the real problem while hiding what I had become, that was the worst. The discovery came in September. Not dramatically, not through a found phone or a suspicious friend. It came through Marcus himself. They had a falling out, Daniel and Marcus, over something completely unrelated. A money disagreement, something old and unresolved. And in the anger of that argument, Marcus said something to Daniel that he later told me he hadn't meant to say. He said it was an accident. I've never fully believed that. Daniel came home that evening, and I knew immediately something had happened. He had a stillness about him that I'd never seen before. Not angry stillness, shattered stillness. The kind that comes after something fundamental has broken. He set his keys on the counter. He didn't look at me. "Marcus told me," he said. 3 words, that's all. I felt the floor tilt. I felt everything I had built and hidden and maintained come apart in real time. I thought about lying. The instinct was immediate and automatic. And then I looked at Daniel's face, and I couldn't. I simply couldn't. "Daniel, how long?" And I told him, not everything at once. It came out in pieces, like something broken being carefully laid on a table. He didn't raise his voice. That was somehow worse than if he had. He just kept asking calm, precise questions, and I kept answering them, and with every answer I watched something die in his eyes. At some point, he took off his wedding ring. He didn't throw it. He just placed it very carefully on the kitchen counter, the way you put down something fragile. Then he said, "I need you to leave tonight." I stayed at my sister's for 3 weeks. Those were the loneliest weeks of my life, and I had no right to call them lonely, which made them worse. My sister didn't yell at me either. She was quiet and practical, and she gave me a room, and she didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. But I saw the look in her eyes. Disappointment. The specific kind that comes from someone who expected better from you and is having to revise their understanding of who you are. I lost Marcus too, obviously. Whatever I had told myself that was, it evaporated completely the moment it was exposed to reality. He called me twice after the discovery, and I didn't answer. I had nothing to say to him. I was too busy being furious at him for something I had done equally, which I recognize as deeply unfair. But grief isn't logical. Daniel and I tried therapy for 6 weeks. I will say that for him, he tried. He sat in that room, and he was honest, and he was willing, and if I could go back and give him a different wife, I would. But we couldn't get past it. Some things, when broken, don't go back together. They become something different. And neither of us wanted different. We had wanted what we had. We signed divorce papers in January. It's been 4 years now. I'm 30, and I live in a different city, and I've done a great deal of therapy of my own therapy where I've had to sit with questions I would rather have avoided. Why did I do it? Was it really just loneliness? Or was I someone who, when faced with discomfort and distance, chose escape over honesty? Could I have had that conversation with Daniel, the real one, the hard one, and asked for what I needed? And if he hadn't responded, could I have left with my integrity intact? I think the answer is yes. I think I could have done that. I didn't. That's the thing I have to live with. I want to be very clear about something because I think confessional content like this can be misread. I'm not telling you this story for sympathy. I'm not looking for someone to say, well, Daniel was emotionally absent, so it's understandable. It's not a defense. It's a context. Context and excuse are different things, and it took me a long time to understand that distinction. What I am saying is that I was a young woman who didn't have the courage to be honest about what she needed. And instead of finding that courage, I took a path that hurt someone who didn't deserve it, shattered a friendship, humiliated my family, and cost me years of sleep and self-respect. Daniel has moved on. He's remarried now. I heard through a mutual friend that he's happy, genuinely happy. And I felt when I heard that something complicated, something I'm not sure has a clean name. Relief, maybe. Guilt. The specific sadness of realizing that the story ended better for someone after you left than it might have if you'd stayed. I hope that's true. I hope he got what I couldn't give him. As for me, I'm learning. I'm learning what honesty costs before you pay it versus what it costs after you avoid it. I'm learning that loneliness inside a marriage is real and valid and needs to be spoken out loud, directly, even when that's terrifying. I'm learning that the version of myself that reached for something secret rather than something difficult was a version of myself I never want to return to. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've fully forgiven myself, and I'm not certain I should yet. But I am asking you, if you're watching this and something in my story hit too close to home, I'm asking you to have the conversation you've been avoiding. With your partner, with yourself, with whoever needs to hear it. Have it before you make a choice you can't unmake. Because the thing about choices like mine is that they feel like answers. They feel like release and relief and finally breathing. And they are, for about 30 seconds. And then you're sitting in your driveway at midnight, unable to go inside your own house, and you understand that you haven't solved anything. You've only built a much larger problem. And you're going to carry it for a very long time. If any part of this story moved you or made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.